My name is Irene and I am 33 years old. I never imagined my life would split so cleanly into before and after. But the night my parents abandoned me in the hospital for my sister's lie was the exact moment everything changed. I was lying on a narrow white bed, the smell of antiseptic burning my nose, my hands shaking as a doctor explained that complications had set in and I needed immediate care and someone to sign consent forms. I remember reaching for my phone, calling my parents again and again, my voice clear, throat cracking as I left messages that grew more desperate each time. They finally answered, but instead of concern, I heard irritation. My younger sister had called them first, crying hysterically, claiming I was faking my condition for attention and that she was the one in crisis. They believed her without hesitation. Within an hour, my parents arrived at the hospital, not to see me, but to pick her up from the parking lot because she couldn't drive in her emotional state. I watched from my bed as the nurse's face hardened, and she quietly told me my parents had left. That was the moment I learned how disposable I was to them. The next morning, after surgery and a long night of fear, I was discharged alone. No calls, no apologies, no explanations. That was 8 years ago. And since then, I have not spoken to my parents. I haven't spoken to my parents in 8 years after they chose my sister over me during the worst moment of my life. And those words are not dramatic. They are painfully literal. In the years that followed, I rebuilt myself in silence. I moved cities, changed my number, and learned how to survive without the illusion of family. Therapy taught me that what hurt most wasn't the hospital bed or the surgery, but the realization that my parents had always seen my sister as fragile and me as replaceable. Holidays became something I avoided, especially Christmas. The lights, the music, the forced joy. It all reminded me of what I had lost and what I never truly had. So, when last Christmas Eve arrived, I planned to spend it like all the others, alone with the curtains drawn, pretending it was just another cold night. Snow was falling softly outside when a knock echoed through my apartment. Sharp and unexpected, I froze. No one ever visited me, especially not on Christmas Eve. Another knock came, smaller this time, almost hesitant, when I opened the door. A little girl stood there, maybe 6 or 7 years old, her cheeks red from the cold, her small hands clutching a handmade photo album tied with a fraying ribbon. She looked up at me with wide, nervous eyes and said my name like she had practiced it. Last Christmas Eve, a little girl knocked on my door, clutching a handmade photo album. And in that instant, something in my chest tightened. I asked her who she was and where her parents were, but she only shook her head and held the album out to me. "This is for you," she said. "They told me you would understand." My hands trembled as I took it. The cover was decorated with uneven stickers and glitter, the kind only a child would use. I invited her inside, wrapped her in a blanket, and called the police to make sure she wasn't lost. But part of me was already afraid of the answer. When I finally sat down and opened the album, my breath left my body. When I opened the first page and saw who had sent her, I collapsed to my knees. Staring back at me was a photo of my grandmother, my mother's mother, smiling softly, her arm around a much younger version of me. Written in careful, shaky handwriting beneath it were the words. I saw everything. My grandmother had been the only one who ever believed me. The only one who questioned my sister's stories. The only one who tried to protect me. She had passed away 2 years after the hospital incident, or so I had been told. My parents said she died angry at me, that she blamed me for tearing the family apart. But that page told a different story. As I turned the pages, memories unfolded, photos of hospital visits, handwritten notes, dates circled in red, evidence, proof. My grandmother had known the truth about my sister's lie and my parents' choice. She had documented everything, waiting for the right moment, waiting for someone innocent enough to deliver it without being stopped. The little girl watched me quietly as tears streamed down my face, not understanding the weight of what she had carried to my door. That night, my past caught up with me, and I realized the story I had been told for years was built on deception. The truth was about to surface, and my parents had no idea that the woman they dismissed had seen everything. I sat on the floor for a long time after that. The little girl beside me swinging her feet, humming softly like this, was just another errand she'd been sent on. Page after page, my grandmother's truth unfolded. There were copies of hospital records showing my admission date matched exactly with the night my sister claimed her emergency. There were notes in my grandmother's handwriting describing how she had followed my parents to the parking lot that night, how she had heard my sister admit through tears that she lied because she was jealous, because she was scared I would finally get the attention she thought belonged only to her. My grandmother wrote that she confronted my parents right there, begging them to go back inside to see me, but they brushed her off, saying they were too tired of Irene's drama. Reading those words felt worse than the surgery ever had. It wasn't just neglect, it was a choice, a deliberate one. My grandmother wrote that she stayed with me after my parents left, holding my hand while I slept, promising herself she would protect the truth, even if she couldn't protect me anymore. She knew my parents wouldn't listen, so she started collecting proof quietly, patiently. She even wrote about how my sister threatened her, how my parents accused her of favoring me and slowly cut her out of their lives. The final pages explained everything. My grandmother had been sick long before she died, and she knew time was running out. She arranged for a neighbor's granddaughter, the little girl now sitting in my living room, to deliver the album when she felt I was ready. That girl's mother had been sworn to secrecy. My grandmother didn't want revenge. She wanted clarity. She wanted me to know I wasn't crazy, weak, or unlovable. I closed the album and pressed it to my chest, sobbing in a way I hadn't allowed myself to in years. The little girl reached over and patted my arm. Whispering, she said, "You'd cry, but that you'd be okay after." That broke me all over again. After the police confirmed the girl was safe and returned her home, I sat alone in the quiet apartment, the Christmas lights blinking softly. For the first time in 8 years, I wasn't alone with lies. I was alone with the truth. The next morning, I did something I never thought I would do. I drove back to my hometown. My parents' house looked exactly the same, like time had politely avoided it. When my mother opened the door and saw me, her face drained of color. My father stood behind her, stiff and defensive. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply placed the photo album on their kitchen table and told them to read. As they turned the pages, excuses spilled out, confusion, denial, anger, but then silence. My sister arrived halfway through, her confidence evaporating as she recognized the handwriting, the photos, the dates. She tried to speak, but for once, no one interrupted me. I told them everything. How I lay in that hospital bed believing I might die alone. How I rebuilt my life without them. How I accepted that I would never matter to them. I repeated the words that defined my life. I haven't spoken to my parents in 8 years after they chose my sister over me during the worst moment of my life. My mother cried. My father looked older than I remembered. My sister said nothing. The truth was undeniable, and my grandmother's quiet strength filled the room like a witness they couldn't silence. They begged me to stay, to forgive, to move forward as a family. But I realized something important in that moment. Closure doesn't always come with reconciliation. Sometimes it comes with confirmation. I told them I didn't come back for apologies. I came back to return the lies they handed me. I walked out with the album under my arm, lighter than I had felt in years. On the drive home, I stopped at my grandmother's grave for the first time. I told her she was right. I told her I was okay now. That night, back in my apartment, I looked at the Christmas lights again. But this time, they didn't hurt. They felt earned. I understood that family isn't defined by blood, but by who shows up when the bed is cold. The lights are harsh, and the truth is inconvenient. If this story moved you, if you believe truth always finds its way out no matter how long it takes, make sure you subscribe to the channel because stories like this deserve to be heard, remembered, and never repeated.